Hello and welcome to Better Business Podcast. My name is Alexi, and welcome to another episode. Now, Julie Mason, who's with us today, hey Julie, has been on my radar for quite some time to get to this podcast. I actually know Julie for a very long time, and I think it's worthwhile, telling the story. But Julie is an expert in LinkedIn, and she's been doing it for quite some time. Now, in my opinion, I find when people start doing things like LinkedIn and Facebook, they typically don't last very long. They jump onto this other thing. Now, Julie's been doing it quite some time. So that to me tells me that she's really quite good at what she does. And I know that firsthand as well, because I've been to her events. I know her clients. And Julie, absolute pleasure having you. Tell us about how you got into all this LinkedIn stuff. Tell us about your story, because I think it's quite motivational for a lot of people.
Hey, Alexi, so great to see you as always. Yes, it's been 16 or 17 years since we first met, way back when at, I think it was an Our Internet Secrets event down in Sydney, if memory serves me right. And you impressed me straight off the bat. I think you got up and shared a story about how you created an online, revenue funnel from something that was going on with the Olympics or some
Sounds like
international sporting event, and you were hacking it to make some money, and you did really well. And I was like, oh, I got to keep you on my radar.
Yeah, that was interesting. I called it the occasional marketing back then. And for those who are listening, I basically found a bit of a loophole within Google where I could rank videos for certain event results, like 50-meter freestyle swimming, Olympic Games, and I'd be coming up number one. And I was driving so much traffic through my website and capitalizing through affiliate marketing and AdSense. It was quite an interesting venture, but thanks for reminding me.
You're brilliant.
Thank you.
So yeah, we go back sometime, but I think that was the start of my online journey. And basically what happened from there was from that event, it introduced me to other speakers. And I remember sitting in on an event on the Gold Coast, run by a guy named Barnaby, who you and I know very well. And he taught about Facebook and LinkedIn, and my little brain just went, wow. And to give people a little bit of backstory, I've been in traditional sales for a long time. And in fact, I've done over 15 years of door-to-door cold calling. So a lot of people groan at that. But when I heard him say, and this is the part that made me fall in love with LinkedIn, he said that 73% of the people on LinkedIn are decision makers or influencers on the decisions in the business. And I just went, oh, that's amazing, because if you've done 15 years of door-to-door cold calling, you go through a lot of people who are gatekeepers who will stop you from getting to the decision maker. So I got really excited about that. And I think that's where my love affair with LinkedIn started. And that's now, 16 years ago. And I've been teaching LinkedIn for 14 years now to other small businesses. And I've now tutored at the University of Sydney, the University of Queensland, Griffith University, and I've been a faculty member for recruiter.com, which is one of the third largest job sites in the world. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Wow. So it sounds like you've tried yourself in a number of different things. So what made you come to that event? I mean, back in 2008 from memory, because that's when I was doing the occasional marketing. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do actually. I read a book, I think it was by Dale Beaumont, I think, on secrets of internet marketers.
Okay.
And I read about a couple of people. There were two things that I identified that I wanted to find out more about. One was ebooks, which Andrew and Daryl specialized back in the day, in that time frame. And the other one was eBay with Matt and Amanda Clarkson, who were featured in that book as well. And so I checked out both of those, but I fell in love with ebooks and what Andrew and Daryl were teaching. And so I applied pretty much, as you know, you've known my journey. I applied what they taught me. And it's been an evolution process without a doubt. I know that my first ebook that I wrote completely flopped. I think I missed the research part to find out if there was a demand there or not, and if it was a paid demand. But it was a learning experience, and all of that culminated into the success that I've experienced over that time frame. So I went from building my own web design agency and SEO agency, as you well know, to then people started asking me how I was using social media to grow my own business. And that's what started me teaching Facebook and LinkedIn, and I think I ran a LinkedIn and Facebook workshop every month for 5 years in Brisbane. And then we both were, we've done very similar mentoring programs over the years. We find ourselves in the same program at the same time, which I always think is quite funny.
Yeah.
We often have a laugh about that. But we were in with one particular mentor, and she suggested that I specialize where I get the most results, and that happened to be LinkedIn. And not just where I got the most results, where my clients also got the fastest and best results, and that was LinkedIn. So you're really niching into LinkedIn for over 9 years now. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting journey that you went through, and I can certainly relate to it. First of all, I guess you're discovering yourself as to what you're doing, what you can be doing. You're trialing all these different things. Then you sort of start to try a few things, and typically most startups or businesses would go and try 3 or 4 different things, spread themselves out, and everything's sort of okay. But one service that does really well typically doesn't get the love nor the clients in order for you to scale it. And then a business coach comes along and says, hey, you know what, this is your magic, focus, and then boom, something happens. For a lot of people, this happens quite naturally. But I guess what validates you, Julie, you're right. We have been in the same seminar room way too many times. We've done the same coaching programs as well. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to interview you is because I can relate to the thought process and your decision making. And oftentimes for me, it's almost like, hey, Julie's there. This validates me being here as well. It's just became natural. Now, let's get back to LinkedIn. Decision makers on LinkedIn. I 100% agree with that. I think the majority of dilemma with social media is that you're speaking to God knows who. Sometimes it's not really the person that's they're pretending to be. They don't really want to be buying anything or exposing their professional or business side. They're just having fun. Whereas LinkedIn then goes boom the other way. But remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you were at one stage dabbling into the whole Facebook space. So what did you learn from that?
Well, look, the two platforms are very different in terms of intention for the users. So I did a lot of Facebook marketing way back in the day, and I think it was a lot easier back then as well. People weren't really using it as effectively as they could have. And I remember back then with my web design agency, I was one of the Facebook developers who, back in those days, we could actually build like a mini website within your company page on Facebook, which was quite unique. And we could have opt-in pages and competition pages and all sorts of things on there that you can't do nowadays, which is, I miss those days, really, I do. But, a lot's changed. And nowadays we've got well over 2 billion users on Facebook, and the average Facebook user checks in 16 times a day.
Wow.
Now, they're coming in there to be social first and foremost, and to self-express. So there is a lot of competition in terms of content that's being put on this platform, which is why Mark Zuckerberg came out around 2019 and said, look, if you do have a company page, it's probably going to go to 0 in terms of engagement level, because our users have told us we don't want to see all of that. We want to see what our friends are doing. And so they put their focus in Facebook more to what was going to be paid to play. So in other words, if you want your company post to be seen, you have to pay for Facebook ads for that to happen. And also they recognized that Facebook was moving in and community groups were really powerful. So they spent a lot more time focusing on community groups in Facebook as well. So I had really moved out of the space of that at that time anyway. I still use Facebook for my own personal uses. I probably don't market on there very much, because I know that unless you really are spending significant, time and effort, and also, boosting strategically your posts, that it really isn't as worthwhile as what I could do for LinkedIn. And so let me give you and your listeners a comparative to LinkedIn at the moment. So 2.2 billion users on Facebook, users checking in 16 times a day, tons of content coming onto there, makes it really hard to get your content found. Whereas on LinkedIn, we've got just over 950 million users at the moment, or 50 million members at the moment. Only 40% check in once a day, and they come there with a mindset that is business first and foremost. So they're really there with a different psychology. They're not necessarily there to socialize. they aren't there to network strategically, but they're not necessarily networking as in friends finding as much as they are looking for people who can help them in their business or with their career or something along those lines. The other thing to note here as well, recent statistics that have come out from Microsoft's reporting that they do at the end of every quarter, and LinkedIn was purchased by Microsoft a few years back for 26.5 billion, best database that they've ever bought, because it has all their clients on it, obviously, but for Microsoft, that is. But they do a quarterly report, and in the last 12 months, they've talked about, you know, that there are only about 3 million people on LinkedIn who are posting consistently. Now, that's really interesting. That's less than 0.4% of the community on LinkedIn who are posting consistently. But they also tell us that those people who are posting consistently get the lion's share of 9 billion post impressions per week. Now, post impression, as you and I know, means that when you scroll your LinkedIn feed, if you see that post, that's an impression. So that means that they're getting the lion's share, those 3 million people, of 9 billion post impressions per week. I mean, the numbers are phenomenal. And my clients have experienced this, you know, this year in particular, when I've suggested to them, look, it's time to really step up your content game on LinkedIn and be more visible. And they notice their metrics go up very quickly with their engagement and their posts. So yeah, look, there's a lot of opportunities still to be had on LinkedIn that most people, I don't think, use. I think actually the statistics are that only 11% of people know how, 11% of members on LinkedIn, I should say, know how to use the platform effectively. So
yeah. And look, I think Facebook has created a lot of bad habits when it comes to professional social media, because unfortunately, majority of people I come across, they tend to try to use LinkedIn in exactly the same way as Facebook. They think, hey, I'm going to post something fun. I'm going to go and like something and comment on a post of somebody. But I find that the engagement is not quite the same. I find that the end result is not quite the same. And where Facebook has obviously introduced their advertising platform, LinkedIn has obviously done it a bit differently initially, and then they sort of did a very similar thing. But the prices are astronomical. Like if you are to follow exactly the same approach on LinkedIn that you're doing on Facebook, you'd probably be paying, without exaggeration, 100 times more. So,
oh yeah,
yeah,
the ads on LinkedIn are very expensive in comparison to other Facebook or other ad platforms in general, not just Facebook, but in general. And what I teach is more organic strategy. I think there's a lot that you can do, even on the free version of LinkedIn. And a lot of people ask me, you know, do I need to have the paid version of LinkedIn? And I go, well, do you have a strategy for using LinkedIn? And most people go, no. And I said, well, then it doesn't really matter having a paid version if you don't have a strategy, because you're probably not going to get great results anyway. So why pay for something if you're not using it correctly in the first place anyway? And that's where most people fall down. They don't really have a defined strategy of how to use it. And that's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm being mindful of our listeners' time here, but and I'm sure you and I can talk about LinkedIn all day long. There's obviously, you know, various forms of engagement, optimizing your profile, and we could easily spend the next hour talking about all those things. I just think that you know, there's always a trend. There's always something that works better than others. So let's say if we are to sort of look into things that are working the best right now, what would be the trends? What would you recommend business owners, especially in the B2B environment, given the fact that they obviously are interested in LinkedIn? What would be, I guess, a strategy or the focus that you'd recommend, you know, just really looking into right now, 2023, December? What's LinkedIn good for?
Oh, look, if you're a B2B, definitely you should be on like business to business type business, service professionals, a speaker, coach, even trades. Look, there is a very vibrant construction industry on LinkedIn that most people don't even look at for that aspect. There is so much there on offer that you can do. I would definitely say you want a solid content strategy would be one. But one of the things that my clients and I are working on a lot this year is a feature on LinkedIn called LinkedIn Events. And you can use this whether you're running events or not. And this is the sexy part of it. So LinkedIn Events, obviously, if you run an event, whether it's something like your podcast, for example, or it's a webinar or masterclass, or you're doing an in-person live event, a networking event, any kind of event that you're running, you can use LinkedIn events really successfully for that. And LinkedIn tell us again with their quarterly reports that there are 24,000 new events created each week on LinkedIn.
Wow.
The interesting thing here that happens is that there are also 1.5 million RSVPs to those events each week as well, which averages out, if you averaged out how many events created and how many people attend, it averages about 62 people per event. Now, most people would go, wow, that's awesome. I'd love 62 people at my event. And it's not hard to do, but there are strategies of using this that most people are falling down on, and that's why they're not getting the results that they like. And that's where they go, LinkedIn doesn't work, I'll give up on it. It's just a load of crock. But the reality of it is that they haven't got the strategy. And what I've been teaching my clients this year is a really defined strategy on setting up the event effectively in the first place, strategically inviting connections, and LinkedIn actually promote your event free in 4 different methods: via the news feed, via search, via invitations, the My Network tab it's called, and then DMs that you can send people as well. So that's extraordinary, quite frankly. It's extraordinary that they would put so much effort into promoting your event in so many different ways. So it's a great thing, first and foremost. But essentially, if you invite people to your event, that's where the happy clicks, and I'm calling it happy clicks, being the RSVP or the accept an attendance to your event, happens, where it will show up in the person's My Network tab that you've been invited to this event, and you can either accept or ignore. And if you accept, for most people, they probably haven't taken the time to go and have a look through the description of that event, or even find out what the process is to attend the event. That it might be an in-person event and they might actually have to pay for that, but they've just clicked accept thinking, oh, well, that's all I need to do. The follow-up is what's really critical to making it successful for you, where once you've got those happy clicks, those people clicking the accept button, then you want to follow up with those people to ensure that they are motivated to take the next action that needs to happen, whether it's register on the Zoom for the Zoom meeting that you're doing, whether it's to go to a landing page and actually pay $97 to attend a 2-hour evening event, or whether they're paying $1,400 to go to a corporate lunch and learn, whatever that might be. You've got to let them know that there is a process that they need to follow, and do it in a motivating and an anticipatory type of manner that encourages them to take those actions. And that's where that can convert. And on top of that, then you want to also continue to promote that event. What I remind people about, there is a caveat around LinkedIn that I want to remind people of, is that if we think of social media networks like the Autobahn highways in Europe, where you can go unlimited kilometers an hour or miles an hour down the highway, and you think of the fast lane being Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and that kind of thing, and then Facebook is probably a little slower in the middle lane there, and then LinkedIn is on the far left lane, the slow lane. It's just putting along. It takes time for people. Remember, only 40% of people check in once a day. So you've got to allow a little extra lead time in there for your events, and make sure that you're marketing it well for that to happen. But a recent client of mine who hasn't done events for quite some time, I coached her through how to put together her strategy and her event strategy with that, from go to well on presentation, call to action, the whole thing, promotion, etc. And she ended up getting about 149 registrants or happy clicks to her event. I think she ended up with about 50 who were live on the call, which is actually pretty much on the attrition mark or the percentage mark of conversion at the moment. She ran an excellent event, got great follow through on her calls to action, and really successful, far more than what she's experiencing elsewhere, without doing, by the way, any paid ads on any of that. And that's the important thing to know. This is all done on an organic matter. So yeah, it's a really underrated feature of LinkedIn. that most people just are not harnessing.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool. And are you finding that this feature works for physical events or
Yeah,
webinars, or just about for
all
any
of
sort
it.
of event? Okay, wow.
All of it. So the other thing that I mentioned is that you can use this event whether you run events or not. So let's talk about the or not part, because that's pretty sexy, right? So if you like, as I said, 24,000 new events created every week on LinkedIn. And all you have to do to find out what events are running in your industry is go up to the search box on the homepage of LinkedIn, type in a keyword that you might want around your particular industry or event that you would like to find, where maybe you want to find out where your target audience is hanging out, right? And knowing where your target audience is hanging out is a really key thing. So, for example, I'm going to give you an example that was really out of the box for me in this past 18 months, right? I have a client who is a geotechnical seismic engineer. He's only one of 4 people in the world with that qualification that specializes in seismic movement for underground mining. So very niche market. And one of the things that I did was have a look up geotechnical for events on LinkedIn. I just put in the keyword geotechnical into the search box, clicked enter. Then LinkedIn bring up these filters that say, well, are you searching for people who are geotechnical engineers? Are you searching for posts? Are you searching for jobs? Are you searching for events or groups around this, right? There's a heap of things that it filters down. So I selected events, and there were multiple events that were running for the keyword geotechnical engineer. It's a very specific niche market. One of those events had 680 odd attendees going to it.
Wow.
I know, right? You kind of go, really? There's that many people interested in this event? Okay, so let's have a look at it. So I clicked on the event and had a look at the description. Of course, I'm not a geotechnical engineer, so I wasn't really interested in attending it. But if you do click the happy accept button or attend button, as it may be, what it will do on the event page, and this is the secret sauce, right? This is the part that everyone's ears should be pricking up about right now, is that when you click the attend button, whether you choose to pay and attend the event or not, on the event page, you will see a description page, a comments tab, and a networking tab. But the networking tab won't be there until you click attend. When you click attend, oh, bada bing, bada boom, then this networking tab appears on that event page, and it literally shows you all those 680 people who are attending that geotechnical engineering event.
Wow, that's pretty full on. I guess if you're looking to build a target list or really start connecting with people, it's right there, really right in front of you. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool, because I know that from a marketing perspective, a long time ago, Andrew Grant, who, by the way, Andrew Dell, I've recorded a podcast with him. We mentioned them earlier with the ebook stuff. Said to me, the power in the business is actually in the list of the business. So you build a list, and then from there, that's it. And for a long time, that sort of concept didn't quite resonate. I mean, you can look at it from many different perspectives, but just about any established business has got a list that people can start doing email marketing to, I don't know, social media, TikTok, whatever, because already there's a qualified audience that knows, likes, and trusts you. At least majority of them should be. And then, your whole idea then becomes, where do I find another list just like that? So partnering with other businesses, worked out quite well, where you could do some sort of a cross collaboration events once again, that actually allow you to do that. But now you just give me a completely another idea where, if you are looking at the attendees of the event, that certainly works out. I mean, I can certainly relate. You and I have been to the same events, and I could probably think about another half a dozen people whom I met in that sort of same format that were going through various events, with a common goal of potentially starting something, doing something, changing something. Yeah, awesome.
Well, let me just take what you've said and give you an even sexier part of LinkedIn events around this. So you can set up an event on a personal profile or on a company page. So if you've got a company page on LinkedIn, you can set it up there. Now, this is the only place that LinkedIn will allow you, with their permission, to collect people's names and email addresses and put it into your CRM. It is the only place, provided you have a privacy policy on your website that is GDPR compliant. Now, I won't go into all the technical terms of GDPR compliant, People can Google that, and I highly encourage you to do so. But if you have a privacy policy on your website that is GDPR compliant, you can put that into the events setup, and that will say to LinkedIn, yes, you've ticked that box for us. We will allow you to collect people's names and email addresses and put them straight into your CRM from LinkedIn if you so choose. And you can use a Zapier for that. Zapier is a kind of like if this happens, then you can do that, and you can create that. And it's the only recipe on Zapier that is allowed by LinkedIn, by the way, which again is phenomenal, right? But I've seen one person on LinkedIn who targeted specifically executive women who did an advanced strategy to LinkedIn events, what I call a rolling event. I don't know whether LinkedIn call this a rolling event or not, but I've called it, from what I have seen on the platform, a rolling event, which means that the event never quite finishes. It doesn't, like, the event each week happens, and half an hour before that week's event happens on Zoom, she updates it for the next week's one so that you can re-register, and it just does a loop, basically. If you don't do the update to the event page within half an hour before the event goes live, it'll cut off that event and you have to start from scratch. But she'd done a rolling event targeting executive women, and of course built that up and built that up and built that up, and ended up having 24,000 attendees listed on that event of executive women. Now, she's done that from her business company page, which meant that she got to add most of those names to her list. If they had checked the box, there is some things to that. Doesn't mean you get every single name. They have to allow you to do that. But regardless, how phenomenal is that to then build a list for free through LinkedIn with 24,000 targeted names?
That's pretty neat trick. And essentially, for our listeners, if I understand this correctly, you have an event that you basically keep running every week. It sort of repeats itself, but the registrants remain the same. So in the eyes of the person looking for an event, let's say first week you come in, there's 2 people registered. You're like, nah, not very interested. 3 weeks later, you're like, hey, there's 100 people. There's actually more motivation and more credibility behind that as well.
Exactly. From a psychological standpoint, we want to attend events that are heavily attended. So that's right. As that kept going, it also popped it up on the search factor of LinkedIn events as well. So because there were a lot more people attending it, it was getting a lot of traction, and so forth. I mean, it's a fantastic strategy. It's a little bit more of an advanced strategy, but still, nonetheless, it's a fantastic way to build the list if you want to as well.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, it's good to know about all these little components, but I often find that a lot of business owners, they are specifically hunting for these little things like, oh my God, give me this trick, give me that trick. And then a month later, I meet them and they're like, yeah, how'd it go? I was like, oh yeah, we did this and that. It's like, well, not really the outcome. And then you go and talk to some other people who basically went and looked into a strategy instead of a particular tool. And they're like, oh my God, everything's going fine. Like, I heard a story about some guy who basically was doing Google ads using lead pages at the time, charging people like $5,000 and getting like awesome conversions. Like, really? Lead pages? $49 per month, anyone could do it. But then, like you said, the secret sauce, the strategy, the actual approach, and that was the part that was missing. And I think that's...
But Alexi, you and I both know that if it's easy, everyone would do it, but it's not always easy.
That's right. That's right.
It requires you, as you say, there's a very big difference between tactics and strategy. Tactics are actions that you can do. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Let's give that a shot and see how it is, or having a strategy as to how that ties in with your business. I mean, I came across a website just this week where I went, her call to action is consistent all the way through the website. Join my free masterclass, join my free masterclass, join my free master. It's one call to action that is driving people into building a list, joining a free masterclass that has massive value for them built into it, and then upselling them into whatever service that they want to sell. That's a strategy, but it has to be funneled correctly. And there are multiple parts to that funnel, as you and I well know. And most people will take 1 or 2 parts of those funnels and then fail to do it, which is why I failed in my first ebook, because I skipped a few steps, right? I tried to, jump over a few key important things that, was going to make it whether a successful ebook or not. Back in those days, the same thing applies today. You want it to work, then do the strategy.
Yeah, I think it's it's probably a bottleneck within humans' mindset, where you're sort of trying to fine tune and perfect things that you sort of understand enough about. And then it sort of goes into a bit of a challenge. I found myself fiddling with things like, Google Analytics or, website development back in the days where really, in essence, not much changes, but you keep playing around with these figures. You're thinking you're making a change. You feel like you're making a progress, but in the grand scheme of things, not much changes. You become so perfectionist in one little field that you actually miss the bigger picture, which is actually where the change is. And I guess the biggest problem is that there's a time element that a lot of people don't consider. There's so much time that you spend over doing this, fine-tuning things, analyzing things, and so on, that oftentimes the boat is gone. Hey, It's December right now. It's probably not the right timing for a lot of people to start their marketing campaigns, especially if they're planning to go on holidays. But it's a time element. 6 months ago would have been a completely different scenario. But I guess, it's obviously relevant to specific businesses and their behavior around this time as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So with this, with all this LinkedIn stuff, look, I know obviously there's a lot of moving parts, and look, a year ago that'd be another trick, and there'd be something else that's working. How do you help businesses? Do you do one-on-one? Do you do group? Like, what's your approach?
For the last little while, I've been more focused on the one-on-one, developing tailored LinkedIn strategies for clients. That is where they get the best results, because we're working to develop a step-by-step action plan to achieve their business goal. And we look at all elements, as you would know from, your business as well. Knowing the ideal client avatar is really important. So then you can create all the marketing messages that's going to appropriate, develop the profile appropriately through to what strategy is going to be the best leverage strategy for them to achieve that goal. So, for example, this year I've had one client down in Melbourne who is in the corporate wellbeing space. Their target audience is, directors of HR for organizations that have a minimum of 500 staff. Ideally, 1,500 would be the ideal number. But, we can track them and research them on LinkedIn without a problem. However, the challenge that we had is that particular target market is not going to be responsive to a LinkedIn message. They get hammered on LinkedIn, as directors of large organizations, from potential candidates, from, other, job hunters, etc. They just are not going to be paying that much attention. So we had to develop a strategy for her that literally, while we did the research and we built value through our content strategy on there. So we had a content or attraction marketing strategy, if you like, where our content would start to build trust and build value and then draw them to us. We had to have an off LinkedIn strategy to accompany that for our cold outreach. And we did a strategy that you and I have known well about for a long time called lumpy mail. And that actually generated her a $50,000 contract within 3 months, but you can't do that if you really got to think about who you are targeting, what your goals are for your business are, how that person you're targeting wants to be approached, what's going to be the best method for that, so not every single strategy is the same. And I get great joy and pleasure in seeing clients get great results, in developing that. But of course, I've got online programs that people can do if they can't afford working with me. There's a variety of things that people can do. And I've got some really exciting things coming out in the new year around using AI to help with your LinkedIn marketing. So I'm super excited about that as well.
That's really cool, and especially that LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft acquired ChatGPT. I reckon there's probably something up in the air that we don't know too much about.
Well, I don't know that they acquired ChatGPT, did they? They just launched their own one recently called Bard, which
that's Google. That's Google.
Oh, that's Google. Sorry, yes, Google and Microsoft, very different. Yeah. So it's been the wild, wild west in AI this past 2 weeks. We've had lots of movement going on there. So apologies, my cotton threads are all getting crossed.
That's all good. I guess to wind back a little bit, especially for our listeners, the whole lumpy mail approach, it's really where you send someone a letter that's got something lumpy in it. And I guess a perfect example is when you receive a credit card. The first thing that people naturally do, and I actually have got an envelope right here for those who are watching, you basically would subconsciously touch it and feel it to see if there's anything else important inside, and that sort of qualifies that it's more important. So by putting various objects in there, you can basically strike that interest, and if you're clever and connected to the right action points, you can actually turn it into a bit of a story. One of my friends, who's a business coach, used to put in toy soldiers in the mail and promote to tradies, where once they open up, the letter would say, "Are you working like a soldier?" And I thought that was really clever in the sense that it actually helped them to engage these people and actually start to read. That was really, really clever. That's what the lumpy mail is about.
Years ago, Alexi, I did the lumpy mail strategy for my own business, and I sent compasses out in the mail to us, and the letter asked, "Are you lost on LinkedIn?
Yeah,
Do you need direction on how to use this?"
Yeah, and look, I think it's a great.
Have some fun with it.
Yeah, I think it's a great tactic. I might say tactic here, because it does require a lot of a strategy, because I've seen many businesses that have done lumpy mail and they're like, "Oh my God, it didn't work." Typically, the biggest problem with lumpy mail is really more about qualifying, which is where I dare to say LinkedIn is a perfect candidate, because you can actually qualify people quite a fair bit, especially if you're connected to the CRM. I think Julie touched on that, but obviously that's another topic altogether. And then from there, if you got a follow-up sequence as well, that could really work out. But anyway, we're talking partially strategy, partially tactics. So if any listeners...
remember, Alexi, that tactics are part of an overall strategy.
100%.
If you just pull out one on its own, it's a tactic without a doubt. But that's what you and I are talking about, with this, is that you want to really develop that strategy all the way from go to woe for the client, ideal client journey, that they come in from a prospect through to conversion, through to being a client. And then after being a client, how do you continue to nurture that relationship so that they come back again and again? What's their repeat level? So yeah, there's got to be a strategy and a sales strategy. Most small businesses, and you and I tend to work very well with small business owners with what we do, that most of them don't even have a defined sales process, let alone a LinkedIn strategy or a website strategy for that matter. So yeah. It's important. It's important that what you're doing on LinkedIn ties in with your website, ties in with the other elements that you're doing. It's not a standalone approach necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in the past, you've been running quite a few events to basically help people sort of understand LinkedIn and touch on a number of topics. Are you planning or are you doing any events in the upcoming future?
I am. I will be doing a lot more online training, so with a lot of great value. As you know me very well, I've done lots of webinars over the years where the content that I give is extremely valuable takeaway content. It's not the type of webinar where you sit there and go, "Oh my gosh, when am I going to get to something that's juicy and worthwhile listening to?" Generally speaking, my webinars are pretty juicy from the get-go. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of those in the new year. I've got lots of plans ahead, particularly with some strategies around harnessing AI to make this more doable for people. My target audience tend to be small to medium business owners, and they're time poor. So we're looking at how can we use AI to give them time in doing these strategies. I do need to make a caveat here that there are tools out there that can automate a lot of LinkedIn. And I ask people to just be very aware that they go against LinkedIn's terms and conditions. So what I'm teaching with this is not about going against LinkedIn's terms and conditions. It's basically giving you the ability to craft messages or to craft content that is going to be compelling and attractive to your ideal target audience without you having to, strain the old brain cells.
Okay, cool. And if somebody wanted to find out more about, I guess, your coaching or your webinars, or maybe more about the actual LinkedIn events, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, hit me up on LinkedIn. So make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love that. I often get a lot of people say, "Hey, I listened to you on XYZ podcast. So please let me know that you came from Alexi's podcast today." That would be great when you send a connection message. Now, if you go into my profile, it's set up as a creator profile. So there'll generally be a follow button, but if you click the 3 dots, you can find the connect button there. So do make sure you connect with me, because I'd like to see what you're doing as well, and build a relationship with you. Send me a note to say that you've been on Alexi's podcast. Check out my website, juliemason.com.au. There's a couple of free resources there that are very valuable that people can download straight away. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the types of strategies you can develop on LinkedIn, I've got a webinar recording that, as of this date of the recording of this podcast that we're doing today, Alexi, will be available for a few more months. So if they go to juliemason.com.au/developing strategy, they will be able to watch that webinar and have a little bit more of an insight as to, and it will get the cogs thinking around, okay, well, how do I create my own, LinkedIn strategy? It will give them a couple of case studies as well.
That's awesome. And look, I'll make sure to put those links into the podcast description. So if you're listening on Spotify or anything, you should be able to access those. Now, Julie, before I let you go, I wanted to do what's called a rapid fire section. I'm not sure if you've seen any of my podcasts with guests, but basically this is where I ask you, questions, simple or not, and I just want something simple as an answer without thinking too much. Are you ready?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so what's the best event or a course that you've done?
Oh, best event that I've been to is actually a software event from Kajabi called Impact in 2019. It was probably the most impactful event that I've ever attended in 17, 18 years. Course. Look, I can't go past doing the old our internet secrets from 16 years ago. That was foundational for me and gave me a lot of information that has served me extremely well over that 16 years. So I'm indebted to Andrew and Daryl Grant for all of that information, and you, Alexi, as well.
Thanks.
Back then. So,
okay. Next question is best personal development book. Just one.
Oh, that's really hard for me.
Especially with a bookshelf behind you, all color-coded, right?
I had resistance to this particular book years ago when we were both given this by our then mentor, and it's called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And I've read it now 4 times, and each time I get another level out of it. And it really is about your mindset, how you can stop doing the upper limiting problem that you have in your head and overcome that. And it's a great reminder of strategies that will help you overcome mindset stuff. So yeah, that would probably be one of my top books. I've got a long list of books.
Okay. And last question, if you weren't doing this today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd still be teaching people how to grow their business, because I am passionate. It's my why. It's why I started my web design company 16 years ago. My passion is to help educate small to medium businesses and entrepreneurs, coaches, etc., how to harness the power of low-cost online marketing to grow their business. And as a sales background, I've been in sales now for over 30 years. It drives my DNA. I just love seeing people get results. So I'd still do that even if I had all the money in the world and didn't need to work a day in the life. I think I'd still be, learning and sharing and trying to help people grow their business.
Great. Well, awesome, Julie. Well, look, I thank you for your time. This has been awesome, and I know that you and I can tap into so many different things through this conversation. I highly endorse Julie as a person who is really passionate about what she does. She's somebody that is close to me in terms of advice. If I am to ask for advice or follow a direction, Julie, you're one of these people. So I just want my listeners to acknowledge that. So for me, obviously, you're a special person. Thanks very much for being here with me.
Thanks so much, Alexi, for inviting me. It's such a joy to see you and to add value to your listeners. I really do treasure our friendship. It's been a cornerstone over the years. We're always there for each other, and it's nice to know.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, look, guys, if you're enjoying this podcast or there's something you'd like to say, please comment below, whichever platform you're on. Feel free to reach out. I will put some contact details, in the description of this podcast. This was Julie Mason. My name is Alexi. Thanks very much for listening, and I chat to you soon.